When you think about healthcare, getting answers fast,
Mm,
it's just so critical, isn't it? A quick diagnosis, knowing right away what's happening. That speed can really make a difference.
absolutely. It changes outcomes.
Okay, so let's unpack something really interesting today. We're doing a deep dive into the global market for point-of-care coagulation testing.
Yeah.
We've got this 2025 report, and it's packed with some fascinating data.
And what's really compelling about point of care, is just how accessible it makes things instead of sending samples off somewhere and waiting.
Right, the waiting game.
Exactly. These are like portable devices. They bring the testing right to the patient. Think about it bedside, in a hospital, a busy clinic, maybe even monitoring at home eventually.
Exactly. So our goal here is to sort of navigate this report, understand the market size right now, where it looks like it's heading, and what's really pushing it forward. We want to give you the key insights kind of efficiently.
And it's worth remembering this kind of rapid coagulation testing. It's vital for managing all sorts of things, inherited conditions like hemophilia, but also complex cardiovascular diseases. So understanding the market isn't just about the dollars and cents.
No, it's about patient care.
It's about how that care is evolving, definitely.
All right, let's jump into the numbers then. This 2025 report, it puts the global market size for point-of-care coagulation testing at USD 1947 million in 2025. That's a pretty big number.
It is, yeah. And the projected growth is just as significant, maybe even more so. By 2033, they're expecting it to hit USD 346.67 million.
Wow.
That kind of upward curve really tells you something about the importance of this tech and healthcare setting.
And the pace of growth, the CAGR.
Yeah, the compound annual growth rate. The report flags that at 7.40% for the period 2025 to 2033.
So pretty steady, healthy expansion then.
That's what it suggests, yeah, consistent growth. And just for context, these numbers are based on 2024 as the base year, looking out to 2033, so it gives a clear runway.
Okay, clear picture. Now, how does this break down geographically? Where's the action concentrated?
Well, North America really stands out right away. For 2025, they're projected to have the biggest slice, over 40% of the global market. That's about USD 720.39 million.
Okay, largest share.
But interestingly, their expected CAGR is a bit more moderate, around 5.9%.
Which kind of makes sense, right?
Yeah.
If they're already a mature market in this area.
Exactly. And within North America, yeah, the U.S. is the heavyweight.
Gears much.
Estimated at USD 568.39 million for 2025, growing at about 5.7%. Then you've got Canada, 86.45 million, slightly faster growth at 6.7%. And Mexico, around 65.56 million, growing at 6.4%.
Okay. What about Europe? How do they fit in?
Europe's also a major player. They hold over 30% of the market, roughly USD 564.63 million in 2025. And their projected CAGR is pretty solid, too, at 6.4%. Shows steady growth there as well.
Any specific countries in Europe driving that?
Yeah, a few stand out. The UK market is notable, about 94.86 million, with a strong 7.2% CAGR. Germany is actually bigger in size, 111.82 million, but slightly slower growth at 6.6%. And Russia is significant too, 87.52 million, though its growth is pegged a bit lower, 5.4%.
Now, Asia. I always feel like there's a big growth story in Asia for these kinds of technologies.
You're absolutely right. The Asia-Pacific region, APAC, accounts for maybe 23% share right now, about USD 467.28 million in 2025. But here's the kicker.
Yeah.
Their projected CAGR. It's a massive 10.1%. That makes it the fastest growing region by quite a margin.
Wow, 10.1. That's a serious jump compared to North America and Europe. What's driving that? Which countries?
Well, China's a huge factor, of course. Market size there is around USD 196.26 million, growing fast at 9.6%. But the real standout in terms of pure growth rate is India.
India.
Yeah. Projected CAGR of 12.0%. Market size starting smaller, USD 46.73 million, but that 12% growth, that's the highest country rate mentioned in the whole report.
Okay, that really highlights where a lot of the future expansion seems to be headed. What about the other regions? South America, Middle East, Africa? They're smaller shares, I assume.
They are, yeah, but still showing decent growth. South America has over 5% share, about USD 74 million in 2025, growing at 8.1%. Brazil and Argentina are important there, actually showing strong CAGRs themselves, 8.7% and 9.0% respectively.
Interesting.
The Middle East is smaller, around 2% share, maybe USD 78 million, but also growing quite fast at 8.7%. You see Saudi Arabia and the UAE with growth rates around 9%.
Okay.
And Africa is about 1% share currently, USD 42.83 million, growing at 7.7%. South Africa is a key market there.
Got it. So that gives us a good map of the world. Now let's segment this differently. What about the types of products and services?
Right. The report looks at it by product, by method, and by end use. So starting with products, it's basically two main buckets. The instruments and analyzers, the machines themselves, and then the consumables and
The
accessories.
stuff you need to run the tests.
Exactly. Test strips, reagents, all that.
And which of those is growing faster?
Interestingly, it's the instruments and analyzers segment that's projected for the fastest growth.
Really? Why is that, do you think?
Well, it probably reflects the push for innovation, newer, maybe smaller, more portable devices that can give you those quick results right there on site.
Okay, that makes sense. But I guess once you have the instruments, the consumables become pretty crucial.
Oh, absolutely. Consumables and accessories are actually expected to dominate the market in terms of overall revenue, which, stands to reason. The more tests are done, the more consumables you need. Hospitals, clinics, they're running a lot of tests.
Right, volume driver. Okay, let's shift to the method outlook. What kinds of tests are we talking about?
So the report says PTINR testing holds the biggest share right now.
PTINR. Remind me.
Prothrombin time and international normalized ratio. It's like the standard test for managing anticoagulant therapy. Patients on blood thinners like warfarin, they need regular PTINR checks to make sure their dosage is right.
Gotcha. Crucial for managing those therapies.
Yeah.
What else?
Well, there's a segment called Viscoelastic Coagulation monitoring that's showing rapid growth. Now, this is really valuable in, say, critical care settings
How so?
because unlike a standard PTINR, which gives you like one number at one point in time, viscoelastic tests show you the whole clotting process in real time, how the clot forms, how strong it is, how it breaks down.
Ah, okay. A much more dynamic picture.
Exactly. It lets doctors make much more sort of nuanced decisions, especially when a patient's condition is changing fast. The report also mentions others, which covers things like ACT-activated clotting time and APTT tests.
Okay. And finally, the end-use outlook. Where are these tests actually being performed?
Well, no huge surprise here. Hospitals make up the largest chunk of the market share currently.
Makes sense. High volume, critical needs.
Definitely. They just have a constant need for quick, accurate diagnostics across so many departments.
But are other places catching up, like labs or clinics?
Yeah. Diagnostic laboratories are flagged as a rapidly growing sector here. As the demand increases for managing clotting disorders efficiently, these labs are stepping up to provide those quick turnarounds. Clinics and other settings are also part of the mix, of course.
Okay, so that covers the what and where. Now let's talk about the why. What are the key things really driving this market growth?
There are several big ones. First off, there's just unfortunately an increasing number of patients with bleeding disorders, things like hemophilia, von Willebrand disease, thrombocytopenia. That naturally fuels demand for testing.
Right, the underlying patient need. What about, like, policy or government involvement?
Yeah, that's another driver. We're seeing more government initiatives globally trying to tackle blood-related diseases. That often means more funding, maybe pushes for earlier diagnosis, awareness campaigns, that kind of thing.
And I imagine with, populations getting older generally, cardiovascular disease must be a factor.
Spot on. The rising incidence of things like heart attacks, strokes, which are often tied to clotting issues, directly increases the need for coagulation monitoring, often on a regular basis.
Okay. And the tech itself.
Mm.
Are improvements there pushing things forward?
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge driver. Constant innovation in these POC devices. Think smaller sensors, making things more portable, easier to use. AI is also starting to play a role, potentially making diagnoses faster and more accurate.
Any examples?
Yeah, the report actually mentions Hemasonics getting FDA clearance for their quantahemostasis system back in November 2022. That's a good example of these advanced systems coming online.
Interesting. And what about where healthcare is delivered? Is the shift towards home care playing a role?
Definitely. That trend towards home health care is a big factor. For someone on long-term anticoagulants, being able to test conveniently at home, that's a huge plus. It drives demand for those user-friendly portable devices.
Yeah, I could see that. Convenience and maybe cost effectiveness too.
Potentially, yeah. The report mentions a Thermo Fisher and artificial ink collaboration on COVID testing automation, just as an illustration of how tech is enabling more point of care and potentially home-based diagnostics generally.
Okay, so lots of tailwinds pushing this market forward. But what about headwinds? Anything holding it back?
Well, the main restraint highlighted is the cost. These point of care devices, the analyzers, the maintenance, the consumables, it all adds up.
Right. The initial investment and the ongoing costs.
Exactly. And that can definitely be a barrier, especially for adoption in, say, developing regions or healthcare systems with tighter budgets.
That's a key point. Cost is always a factor. So looking at the bigger picture, what are the main trends shaping this market?
Well, two we've touched on really stand out. That rising tide of cardiovascular disease is a major, major trend driving the need for timely monitoring.
Hmm.
And linked to that, the ongoing shift towards home healthcare is really fueling demand for portable, easy-to-use devices.
So those two seem like the dominant forces right now.
Mhm.
What about the companies involved? Who are the main players?
It's described as a highly competitive market, which makes sense. You've got a mix of big global names and some more specialized regional players.
Like who?
Well, the report lists companies like F. Hoffman LaRoche, Abbott Laboratories, Siemens Healthineers, Medtronic, Haemonetics Corporation, Hemasonics, who we just mentioned, Micropoint Bioscience, Verafin, Cienco Inc., and Kninkly Philips NV.
Okay, yeah, some very familiar names in diagnostics and medtech there. Any interesting moves, like partnerships?
The report does mention one. Roche and Sysmex renewing their partnership back in January 2021. They're collaborating specifically on improving hematology solutions, which obviously ties into this broader area.
Right, strengthening their position. Okay, so pulling it all together, we know North America has the biggest share now.
Right, dominated in 2025.
But looking ahead, where's the fastest growth expected?
That's clearly projected to be the Asia-Pacific region. They've got that really high CAGR we talked about. But Europe is also expected to see significant gains, maintaining strong, steady growth.
Okay, let's try and summarize the key takeaways then as we wrap up this deep dive.
Sounds good. So essentially, we've seen the global point-of-care coagulation testing market is already pretty substantial, nearly $2 billion USD in 2025, and it's projected to grow strongly, hitting almost $3.5 billion by 2033.
Right.
And that growth is really being pushed by several factors. More patients needing these tests, government support, the rise in heart disease, big improvements in the technology, and that shift towards home-based care.
We saw the regional picture, North America leading now, but APAC growing fastest. Plus, we look at the key segments, right? Instruments versus consumables.
And the methods PTINR being dominant, but viscoelastic growing fast, and end users, with hospitals being the biggest, but labs growing quickly too.
So understanding all these trends, it really gives you valuable insight into how healthcare diagnostics are changing, doesn't it? More emphasis on speed, accessibility, getting tests closer to the patient.
Exactly. It's a shift towards more immediate, actionable information.
So here's maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. As we see this push towards personalized medicine and more care happening at home, what kind of cool innovations might we see next in point-of-care coagulation testing? What comes after the current tech?
Yeah.
And how could those future advancements really empower people even more to manage their own health?
Yeah, that's a great question. Really gets you thinking about the future potential here. It's a dynamic field for sure.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the point-of-care coagulation testing market. We hope this gave you a clear and useful overview.